Welcome to the Hermetic Astrology Podcast. I'm Gary Caton. You can find me on the web at dreamastrologer.com. Today is Friday, Venus Day, July 7th, 2023. And Venus is currently at her maximum brightness as evening star. When I was out watching the fireworks with some friends in town almost a week ago now, it was literally astounding. Like, I should know this stuff better than anybody, but of all people, I was the one sitting there going, my God, look at how bright Venus is, because it's like, I can sit here and tell you she's at her brightest. I can even tell you that she's 1,000 times or more brighter than anything else in the sky. And that all registers in your head, right? But until you see her and she beams that light into your being, stupendously bright. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the words. It doesn't do justice. There's no way. I could spend the rest of this podcast simply trying to describe how beautiful and bright she is, and it wouldn't even touch it. So you got to get out there, man. Especially because when you do, it catalyzes something inside you. I mean, wow, I've been really feeling the alchemy, actually. And it's wild because that's what I'm here to talk about, as promised. Well, last time we talked about the astronomy and the loop and everything, and like getting our heads wrapped around a more accurate version of what's actually going on. And that's, the technical stuff is important, I think. But this is much more experiential, right? This is like the journey, the spiritual journey, the psychological journey, the emotional journey. Man, I've been in it, It's been really high highs and really sublime, beautiful, and like some really dark shit that I've had to confront. And it's all been good, though. It's all been good. So without further ado, let's talk about the alchemy of Venus retrograde. I made a little presentation for y'all, and those of you who are listening, I will do my best to describe what I'm showing, but if you can, you should visit the YouTube channel to get the full benefit of these here graphics that I'm about to share with you. Okay. So way back when, in a land far away, in a time largely forgotten, I set out, really, and it was clear in my mind. I set out to find magic. I was studying architecture at Virginia Tech, VPI, Virginia Polytechnic Institute. And I was doing all right. I mean, it was way harder than high school was. High school was a breeze for me intellectually, and that was a problem because I actually got through it too easy. Anyway, what was missing, I could have powered through it, like academically, I was doing all right. I wasn't doing nearly as well as I was in high school, but I was doing all right. I mean, I had a 3.0, for fuck's sakes. That's, for me, it's like not good enough. But so I had to decide, like, am I going to power through and like bring this up to snuff? Or am I going to listen to these inner promptings? I mean, I was having dreams that were really, like crows talking to me and stuff. And I realized, like, there's something missing that's really vitally important. And if I don't find it now, I may never find it. And that thing was magic. I realized, like, there's no magic in this for me. I've lost my it's, I guess, growing up a little bit, but if you throw the baby out with the bathwater in the process of growing up, you done messed up, man, in my estimation. So I set out looking for magic, and miraculously, truly miraculously, I mean, I was the fool, man. I was literally, I had a little bit of guidance as far, but not a lot. And I had, so just by divine protection, divine guidance, I found my way, had my dream. I became an astrologer. I've been doing that for 30 years now. But when I look back on it, it didn't take long. When I started studying hermetics, even before, actually, this process was like, this is what introduced me to hermetics. And really, I got it from Demetra's book on the asteroid goddesses first. She talks about how the asteroids represent a process of transformation. She was talking about how they represent like this process of linking the higher and lower octave. How in modern astrology there's this idea that the personal planets are like this one octave and the transpersonal planets are like this other octave. And she said, well, maybe the asteroid goddesses, being astronomically located between the two, can serve as octave transformers, like literally transforming the energy or stepping it up or down between those two octaves. And I thought that was fascinating. And I was doing a thing called this Goddess Astrology podcast at the time. And so I spent a fair amount of time exploring that. And I did a presentation. There's a whole like module in the archives. For those of you that are subscribers, you've probably already looked into it. If you're new and haven't, let me know and I'll send you the link. But for that one particular one, and it's for purchase on the website too, if you'd rather just do the a la carte thing. But yeah, there's a map, actually, right? That's what I found out afterwards. Like, I was part of a process that is archetypal. It became abundantly clear to me, like, this did not happen without a pattern. Like, there's always a pattern. And in fact, the pattern is extremely archetypal. It's like, it's across like the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, Campbell's, Murray Stein, Jungian scholar, talks about it. Christian mysticism, and it's like really basic, archetypal, fundamental pathway, if you will. And I was like, holy wow, like, if there's a pathway, imagine, like, I mean, my empathy sort of went out to anyone who was that proverbial fool like me once upon a time. I was like, man, can you imagine, like, if somebody's going through, because, man, I went through the dark night of the soul back then, homeless. Literally, I remember spending my last dollar, and I was like, man, if I had known that I was on a path and there's a pattern, and like, whew, I would have gone a long way to alleviating some of the suffering and maybe, making it even more potent, more transformative. So I believe this here, if I were to strip everything else away from what I do, honestly, I think this here message is probably the one. If I only had one, this would probably be it. And it's, you can find it everywhere. It's like, it's sort of like, you know, they talk about the Philosopher's Stone as something that penetrates all solid things and renders all subtle things solid and permanent, and it's everywhere but nowhere, and all of this stuff. This is kind of like that. It's sort of like the path to the Philosopher's Stone, if you will. And it's a hidden path, and you don't even know. I didn't even know I was walking it, even though I was clearly on it. So there's 3 steps. And again, we can use the asteroid goddesses, Vesta, Pallas, and Juno to represent these 3 stages. But in alchemy, we talk about 3 colors. And these, so if you want to think about a shadow, and I'm not against the concept of shadow in terms of like the psychological concept, but astronomically, let's be clear, I'm not inviting that back in. Like, there is no retrograde shadow. There simply isn't. It's made up. But if you want to, you know, explore the pre-retrograde, the retrograde proper, and the post-retrograde, and you want to assign properties to that rather than saying pre-retro shadow, to me, that's negretto, man. That's the negretto. That's the blackening. And so the first message is the alchemist would say, when the matter becomes black, rejoice, for this is the beginning of the work. And so if you find yourself in a dark spot, know that you are right where you need to be, and embrace it. Embrace it. You know, it's wild, man. I've seen these symbols so alive in my life, and like the way they show up is so. One of the ways, I haven't even gotten started in the slideshow here, by the way. Let me just finish this one story and then we'll get going. So negretto is about putrefaction. It's about, so basically, even something good, even something beautiful, even the most precious thing that you have from time to time has to be updated, right? That's just life. It has to evolve. It has to keep growing. It has to keep flowing. It's like, that's what nature does. She does not stand still. And so one of the ways that alchemists would introduce the putrefaction into the process, they would sort of, not artificially, because they actually saw it as like, they were nature's helpers. They were just speeding along the natural processes. And so they would introduce manure, because manure, you know, it's like, for instance, with my compost pile in my garden, right? It's past time actually for like the lettuce and stuff that I grew this spring to be composted. I've been sort of putting it off, but I did about half of it. I did some a while back, and when I did, I kind of, you know, just pulled it up and chucked it in a pile, and then mixed in, I had some compost that was already complete, and so I layered it with the compost. And that stuff, when you layer it with something that's already, it's like, that's the metaphor for the Philosopher's Stone. When you introduce even just a little bit, it's like homeopathy. When you introduce even just a little bit of something that's already complete into something that isn't complete, it like speeds the process of completion along. And that stuff like turned into compost, felt like overnight, but it's probably like a week or 2. But it would have sat there for like a month or more without that catalyst, right? And so the catalyst, manure was a catalyst because manure contains the digestive bacteria and all that stuff. It's poop, and poop is a tremendous catalyst, actually. Manure, of course, has to be composted. You can't just throw it on your garden because it'll burn the shit out of it because of the methane and whatnot. But anyway, to the point of the story, I ran into the supervisor of the state park down here, and he was asking me if I'd seen a couple of young men out there working, and I said no. Nah. And we got to talking, and he was telling me how they were working on the bridge and how it was, it needed a lot of work and this and that. So I seen him the next day, and they were there working on the bridge, and I was like, wow, you boys are into it, ain't you? They had tore up a bunch of stuff, and I said, man, I see what you're talking about. And I said, clearly the water's not draining right. He said, yeah. And I said, it seems like the dirt's got in there somehow. It's like, I guess the dirt's coming off the tires. He said, no, it's the manure, the horses, because it's a shared trail between the horses and the bikes and the walkers. And I hadn't thought about it, but man, I mean, putting manure in something, that's like a catalyst for decay, and so that symbol showing up, like the manure. And I told him, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man, because back in the day, they would put something in a bed of manure, and the manure in the process of composting would create heat. And that's how they would, if you want to do a process called digestion in alchemy, it's a soft, gentle heat that you just incubate something in. So you would put like some herbs in some water and just surround in a vessel, and then you would surround it with the manure and cover it in a pit, and it would digest slowly, right, over time. Now, in this particular case, the alchemy was happening in what was perceived, certainly from a financial standpoint, as destructive, because they had to go and repair the bridge and this and that, right? But the point is, like, something that presents itself as a problem can be a blessing in disguise. Like, it's showing you that you're on the path. You just need to direct that energy better, right? This energy is showing up in your life, and that's a fabulous thing. Like, the fact that you've got this natural process of alchemy just happening all on its own, that's fantastic. And if you can just figure out a way to direct, like in this case, I was saying, man, I think you need to direct that water. Like, somebody had basically put the boards too close together, and the water wasn't able to escape, and so it was rotting. So in this case, it was just a matter of directing the water out of the path, and it's all good. But if you look around you, I guarantee you will see these symbols. They're alive, and they speak to you in not so subtle ways. A lot of times it's like, and the thing is, you could totally miss that if you weren't paying attention. And yet, once you see it, it's like, bam, it's like, duh. So, yeah, I mean, I knew that. Then I was, and here's the thing. I was purposefully engaged in the negretto I've been like basically on a diet and like trying to up my exercise game, trying to burn. Like, it's about burning off the gross buildup of like crap that happens in life, right? And so in this case, literally belly fat that built up over the winter. And so I was out there hitting the trail and busting my ass, sweating, and you know, and so I knew I was in the negretto because I had purposefully entered it. But to see that process come alive in the social context of like talking to people on the trail, it was really reassuring to me, like, yeah, mate, you're doing it and it's happening. And you know, it's actually like, that's when I say, like, when the matter becomes black, rejoice, because this is the beginning of the work, you know. And so yeah, I was rejoicing, and I was rejoicing in the fact that these old country boys and I were talking about alchemy for one, you know, without it being awkward. And yeah, like life was just doing its thing, and it's a beautiful thing, you know. So hopefully you can like take whatever problematic expressions of, like, you know, the typical, you know, cliche sort of pop astrology, you know, take on any retrograde is, oh, this or that or the other is going to be fucked up, and here's how you deal with it. And yeah, like there's going to be problems, like, but the problems really are opportunities. They're opportunities for spiritual growth. They're opportunities to get healthier on your body and your soul and your spirit, you know. They truly are. Like, that's not just that's just not like some trite saying. Like, it's bona fide truth for real. All right, so let's get through this thing. So there's 3 colors and 3 stages of transformation, right? Now the Venus star has 5 points on it, and we are in essence transitioning from the Capricorn star point to the Leo star point. And that transition, because of the nature of transition, it is transformative. And so we can use that process of the transformation of the Venus star point to achieve transformation in our life. So to briefly recap, this Capricorn cycle began around the heliacal rise of Venus, that is her first visibility in the eastern sky in the morning, was around January 14th, 2022, 15 degrees of Capricorn. So think about that time, think about that place of your chart, think about what you've learned in that intervening time. The middle of that cycle was a very notable occurrence, which was the first Cazimi, the superior conjunction, was in Libra, 29 Libra, October 22nd. That was a momentous, because the Venus star point hasn't touched Libra for about 200 years. And now we're at the sort of, in one way, it's the apotheosis, because Venus is brightest as evening star, and on the other hand, it's sort of like, it's like the blossom, but the blossom doesn't last long, and pretty soon the blossom dies off and the leaves begin to wither, and we have to move on to. So on the one hand, there, you know, like, don't feel guilty if there's nothing bad. Like, enjoy the blossom for sure, because there's definitely that. And there may be any one of and all 3 of these colors of transformation present all at the same time. So there's the fullness of, or the wholeness, really. Adam calls the brightness in the morning sky the fullness. Adam Gainsberg, my sky astrology partner, he calls the morning brightness the fullness, and the evening brightness the wholeness. Like, there's a wholeness, a completion that's happening now, and at the same time, completeness means decay and transformation, right? and there's only 36 days between the wholeness and the depth of the darkness. So it's pretty quick, really. And so that's why you could be feeling all of the above. I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, so as I was saying, we're now at the maximum elongation, or sorry, that's Mercury, maximum brightness of Venus. And this happens about 36 days before the inferior conjunction. And then 36 days after that, we have the greatest brightness, morning star. So there's 3 events separated by spanning 72 days with the inferior conjunction in the middle. So, and the retrograde proper is around 40 days. So really there's like 15 days before and after the retrograde that fall under this umbrella of pre and post retrograde. I mean, you could call it shadow, but I prefer not to use that word because that word has been done in a way that I think is not that useful. But if I was to call it a pre-retrograde shadow, it would be the negretto shadow. The albedo shadow is somewhere in the middle, and the rubedo shadow is toward the end. Right? And so the reason why this is so transformative is because we are now transitioning between and so Venus literally goes like through the underworld, right? She disappears and then reappears, right? She's in the west, she disappears, she reappears in the east. That's the visual process. So she's transitioning between the Capricorn, and if we just look at the Venus star, right, and we follow from Capricorn, it goes to Leo, from Leo it goes to Aries, from Aries it goes to Scorpio, Libra, and from Scorpio, Libra to Gemini, and then back to Capricorn, Leo, so forth, right? So we're transitioning between the Capricorn, Leo star points, which, you know, happened previously in 2015, right? 8 years is the repeat. And so you might look back at this time of year in 2015. Last time I shared with y'all some photos that I took in 2015 of this process of Venus diving down below the ecliptic and doing this southern loop that you can see here. So the Leo cycle begins, Black rises around August 19th at 17 Leo, and then greatest brilliance is around September 19th at 17 Leo. So you see that which is below, the inferior conjunction is below the visible horizon. It happens, you know, in the heart of the sun. You can't see it. And then greatest brilliance, which is the most visible, most brightest, most beautiful apparition of Venus in the morning sky, happens in the same degrees. And this is basic, you know, as above, so below. But it's even better because it's actually a 3-part. That which is above, course, that which is above, greatest brightness, evening star, corresponds to that which is below, the interior conjunction, which corresponds to that which is above, greatest brilliance, morning star. See, so there's this 3-part process of transformation. I don't know if it's pollen or what, but if you'll excuse me for 1 second. All right. And yeah, if we were to just, you know, divvy it up in thirds, it would look something like basically from July 5th through the end of July, we're in the negretto. And then basically August, you know, the first 4 weeks anyway, is the albedo. And then September, the last week of August and the first 3 weeks of September would be the libido. Now, to be clear, that is probably not going to be your experience, but it's a ballpark estimate, right? I mean, like I said, I've already been feeling all 3 stages. In fact, the wildest thing, I mean, the wildlife has been incredible. So I'm sitting at this bench at this place where I have this like really deep connection with nature, and this moth lands on my foot. And at first I'm like, it tickled, so I like shook it off. And then it flew back and got back on my foot. And I'm like, what's going on here? And this moth is like, I think it's licking the salt, the sweat off my foot, you know? And I'm like, okay, you know, moth needs salt. I don't know if it was a moth or a butterfly, but then eventually it was like tickling too much. And I was like, all right, you can get off there. And it flew up on the bench and sat next to me. I was just like hanging out with this moth. And I realized, like, holy shit, this thing was like predominantly black. So there's the negretto. And then it had these brilliant orange, deep orange stripes on its wings, and then a little white spot on the underneath. So it had all 3 of the alchemical colors present. And I was just like, man, that's profound. I mean, what's the chances that, and I could have easily missed it. I could have easily been like, shoot, get out of here, moth. You're tickling my foot. But I was able to like pay attention and realize like these symbols are talking to you, man, through the animals, which is even cooler. And then later I saw a red-shouldered hawk was circling above and crying, and that's just so beautiful. I love those birds. And I saw the on the way out, I saw the great blue heron fishing, you know, and it let me hang out with it and watch it fishing. That was so awesome. But yeah, this process of negretto, albedo, ribedo, it is somewhat linear in that the blackening has to occur and the whiteness comes out of the darkness, but you might feel like the libido first. So it's sort of linear, but not really, I guess. And this is just a very basic overall timeline of like maybe the predominant function, but they'll be mixed together, right? It's like, it's very organic and fluid. And again, even this greatest brilliance, I mean, you have to calculate a date to anchor it, but really it's like probably as much as a week before and after that date that I'm giving of July 5th, where Venus is extremely bright in the sky, as bright as she ever gets, bright enough to cast shadows, right? And same thing over here. You know, now the interior conjunction, probably I give a 3-day window for the absolute heart of the retrograde, which we call Kazemi, right? So day before and day after of August 13th. But again, week before and after, you're still going to be feeling that process. So that's kind of the basic outline. So yeah, in the Emerald Tablet, it says it rises from the earth to heaven, right? So Venus has been in the 7th-month process of getting higher and brighter, and then descends again to earth, which happens in 36 days, thereby combining it within itself the powers of above and below, right? So it's the mixture of the dark and the light, the conscious and the unconscious, that is the purpose of the Venus retrograde. It's purposeful. The negretto is purposeful. It's this blackening, it's this putrefaction of something that you're finished with. And that serves a purpose. And by purposefully, you know, it's like when I pulled up the kale and the spinach and layered it with the compost, and boom, it's dirt again. And so I finished with one thing and made humus to fertilize the next thing. That's the power of doing this consciously and purposefully, is that, and in a psychological sense, right, the above is the conscious, the below is the unconscious. So we can bring up stuff. And unconscious, I mean, like, there's a particular really nasty negative experience that I went through yet again around the last Venus retrograde, and it's been coming back up for me. So it's not anything I wasn't aware of. It's not anything like, but unconscious simply means I haven't somehow, I don't know why, but this thing has not fully processed, even though it seems like it really should have by now. There's something not finished about it. And so just like going back over and trying to find, okay, what have I missed here? Why is this so persistent? And sort of trying to find that piece that I haven't seen yet. So don't be fooled by the language. Unconscious doesn't mean that you're completely ignorant of it. It just means that you are not completely aware. Two different things. Complete ignorance and complete awareness are ends of the spectrum. Anywhere in between, you're somewhat unconscious. And so just making the unconscious more conscious is really what it's about. And so these three stages, and I talk about this in the Mercury book a lot, in my Mercury book, the first volume, that, you know, this idea that we're one person is really like kind of ridiculous. I mean, we, like in Freudian and in Jungian psychology, we talk about at least three different selves. And in shamanism, we talk about different parts of ourselves. So there's the higher self, which is in Hermetics, that would be the spirit, right? That's like it is our intellect, but it's more than our intellect. And then there's the everyday self, which in Freudian terms is the ego. The ego is the mediator between the superego and the id, right? So the id is our instincts, our survival, our passions. And oh my God, man, Leo, wow, like that's the other thing. Like I remember women friends telling me, oh my God, you know, sometimes I get so turned on in nature, and I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit of a prude, but I was like, wow, like there was part of me that was like, that sounds fun, but it maybe a little weird. I don't know, like, but I mean, wow, like the other day, the breeze was blowing and through my hair, and I had just exercised, and I was like, oh my God, that's totally erotic. I get it now, you know? And so there's this creative, fiery passion that comes out of Leo that is totally something you want to harness. You know, it's like when we say lower self, it's not bad lower, it's just instinctive. It's like this animal part of you that is wonderfully driven to be alive. It's like the riotous joy of nature, just happy to be alive, you know? And man, if you don't have that, oh my God, it's really hard to be creative, to be truly creative, you know? And so reconnecting with that, you know, it could be any one of these things. It may be that, and then on the other hand, like I actually sat for a while doing like self-analysis, just really like looking at this thing, this issue, and being like, okay, and like engaging in conversation with the imaginary, you know, kind of the empty chair thing where you just put this thing in a chair and you try to talk to it, you know, So that was kind of more like the intellectual, spiritual part. And then, trying to maintain a calm, peaceful, accepting environment in my ego and my sort of, the middle self, where both of those things are welcome. And whenever, and like, and so, and noticing when one needs to be put away for a little bit and when the other one needs to come forth and so forth. It's kind of this balancing, it's kind of this limnisket, this flowing sort of mixing of opposites, right? So there's these three parts of self that are being mixed. There's these three phases of the alchemy that are being mixed, and all of this is in context of like the yin and the yang, the masculine, the feminine, the dark and the light, the conscious, unconscious, all the opposites. Any opposite, pick one, like any opposite. They're being mixed together right now. I think we talked about this slide about the ego, the superego, and the id. So the main thing that you really want is to reach a liminal place. You want to be in between. You want to be lost a little bit. And that's what letting go of being in control, of being in charge, of knowing what the heck is going on, of being, sane, even to some degree. If you feel like you're going a little crazy, that's probably a good thing, because like being together is its own neurosis, actually. For me as a Virgo moon, like being together, like having to have everything together and having to have everything ordered, and like, man, that's a total neurosis of mine that I need to like take a freaking vacation from now and then. You know what I'm saying? And so if I find myself saying, dude, you're insane, like, then I stop myself and go, yeah, maybe, but maybe that's okay. And that probably sounds really insane, but that's kind of the point. The point is that liminality is where creation happens, that something new can only be born from a liminal place. It can't be born from something old. The old must give way, and then to liminality, and then it's from liminality that the new is born. And Murray Stein said something really interesting in his book about midlife. He says that the ego experiences liminality as both a has-been and a not yet. So in other words, liminality is between the past and the future. So if you feel like something is like, I don't know, like for instance, like a big part of my career was going around the country giving talks for like a decade. I was all over the place, man. And that got put on hold from, during the pandemic. And now I'm actually starting to wonder, like, do I actually really want to do that again? Or maybe there's something else better. I don't know. So I've actually been like letting that be liminal, and like the pandemic was kind of a forced liminality, which, for better or worse, it was what it was. It is what it is. Now it's like I could just be like, that's it. Restrictions are off. I'm back out there. I'm doing, but like, is that really what I want to do? I don't know yet. And that's okay. And so I'm allowing a liminal thing with that to an extent. I mean, I'm still carrying on doing my thing. I applied to 2 teaching positions recently. So it's not like I'm just totally putting that on hold, but I'm allowing it to be whatever it is without over needing for it to be what it was. You see what I'm saying? And I don't yet know what the next thing it will be. And that's okay. That's great, actually, because that allows for the maximum possibilities. It doesn't have to be what it was. It could be something entirely different. I don't know. It might be something only slightly different. Don't know. But I have the maximum possibility for transformation because I'm in a liminal place, you see. So you have to solve break apart, coagula, put back together. And think about it. The has been, the past, there's so really like this shadow thing, right? Think about this for a second. There's really two aspects to shadow. There's that which is no longer me, that which I'm going to allow to pass away. And there's that which is not yet me. There's things that I don't know about myself, that I haven't experienced, that I haven't, the unlived life that Jung talked about, that's part of the shadow. So we need to separate out, like, okay, you know, there's this part of me that I'm going to let go. And there's, and like, do I want to just see what life organically brings into that space? Or is there something that's actually calling to me that really wants to be, that's kind of crying out for my attention? And if that's the case, like, begin to allow space for it, begin to make space for it, begin to cultivate within that liminality, like a sacred container for it to gestate and grow and see what comes that way, But the first step is about surrender. You have to surrender to the process of, and that means being in a kind of bardo, a kind of in between. You're neither here nor there. Just like Venus, she goes from being evening sky, and she's no longer evening sky. She's not yet morning sky. She's somewhere in between, right? She's in the underworld, or she will be. So, oh, whoops, I typoed on this slide, but so yeah, there's three basic stages, and whether you're talking about, Campbell said the three stages of the heroine's journey was separation, initiation, and return, right? So there's this, like, Campbell separated mythology into two basic parts, which was the way of the village and the way of the forest adventure. So the way of the village is like all of the standard dogma, and dogma need not be negative. It's kind of just the prescribed way of being. When you're in the village, when you're in Rome, do as Romans do. This is how Romans do it. And so there's a whole set of mythology that's about how to be a Roman or Greek or whoever. And then there's the forced adventure, which is how to be liminal, really, and how to be something you didn't even know you were, and so Campbell's broke this part into, so first you have to separate from the dogma of the village. You have to leave the village. You have to go into, and he said, literally, if you're on a path, it's not your path because your path is where there is no path. You have to create your path from chaos, from wilderness, from being lost. So go out there and get a little lost, get a little crazy, like not too much, obviously. You want to be, careful and take care of yourself, and have, like when they go into the labyrinth, right, they leave a thread, like have a way back to a safe place and all that, of course. But you actually need to separate from and enter into liminality, and then in the heart of the, and often, in the myths, the albedo comes straight out of the darkest time, like in the Wizard of Oz, like Dorothy's cornered by the witch, and she just grabs some water and throws it on to help her friend, and it turns out that the love of wanting to help her friend was what conquered the witch, right? Because it melted her, and I'm melting and boom, she's now heroine, and she's initiated, and she's ready to click the red slippers, right? The red slippers, libido gets her home. So there's separation, initiation, return in Campbell's. In alchemy, we call these negretto, albedo, ribetto. In Christian mysticism, they talk about purgation. You need to purge, right? Like I'm doing a purge, I'm doing some fasting and some exercising, and I'm actually getting headaches, which reminds me that I'm releasing toxins and I have to do more water. So there's this, so you literally need to purge the worldliness out of your soul. And then you allow God to fill that space. And then when God enters, you commune with God. There's this sacred communion that happens, and that's the union. That's you become one with God. Right? God, this conception of Christianity, that God is this jealous, spiteful, God that's way up in heaven and just looks down in judgment on us. I mean, that's not the God I know at all, man. My God is someone who loves me and who wants to be with me and wants me walk hand in hand with him. And that's, I mean, talk about like, what more beautiful thing could you ever want to do? And again, Murray Stein talks about separation, and he calls the middle stage liminality. And it's within the liminality that the initiation of Campbell's version comes. And then he calls the final stage reintegration. So, it may not be that anything completely brand new right. It may just be an update. You may break apart something and say, okay, this part's working, this part's not. I'm going to chuck what's not working. I'm going to leave. And then, oh, wow, there's this new twist. Okay, now I've updated my model and I'm off. And that's totally fine. Sometimes that's sort of like, it's kind of like the difference between the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries. The lesser mysteries happen every year. It's like an update. The greater mysteries is like every 4 or 7 years. And it's like a total, like rebirth. It could be either. And reintegration, I think in Stein's view, my view of Stein's view is that that's sort of like the lesser mysteries, like you separate, you go through liminality and you reintegrate with more or less on the same path, but updated and more healthy and so forth, right? All right. And oh yeah, here's a picture of the 3 parts of the soul and the spirit being separated from the corpus, the body. Right. And so we want to break apart these 3 things so that they can each be purified and then put them back together. So it's a process of purification. And the albedo represents when you get the white light of a new idea or a new consciousness or a new feeling, a new instinct that you weren't in touch with before, whatever new thing comes in, that new thing came in precisely because you cleaned house. It's like inviting a guest, right? If you're having guests over, usually you clean up a little bit because, like, I don't know, you want to be respectful. You want to invite and make the space welcoming, right? And so by cleaning up ourselves a little bit, we're inviting spirit and soul to return as these divine guests that revivify and recomplete us into something beautiful and new. So let's just go over these 3 stages a little more in depth. So the negretto is blackening. It's a burning away and or a putrefaction. So like the 2 symbols, like I'm out on the trail, I'm burning up calories, I'm burning off belly fat, right? So there's this burning, but then I'm confronted with this symbol of manure and the bridge is decaying underneath me. And whoa, like, thank God the boys are on top of that. They're like repairing it and fixing it up. But the day before he was doing that, this old boy was telling me, man, I've been on back surgery and kind of things kind of got let go. And now I got to get it back out here. Man, there's work that needs to be done. So he was literally facing up to the fact that, okay, kind of let things go a little bit. And now we need to get this thing ship shape, right? And so there's this process of facing the dead parts, right? Okay, like I either need to let this go or I need to clean it up and break it apart and put it back together. There's this idea of the shadow that goes along with the negretto. The black shadow is the concealed self. Like it's either something that we're terrified of or ashamed of. It could be like perfectly healthy, right? Like, I don't know, like maybe you have, some part of you that's a little bit of an outsider. It's not illegal or immoral or anything. It's just not what most people consider normal, right? And so even that becomes somewhat shadow because you tend to like, even me as an astrologer of 30 years, I don't always tell people. Sometimes I just say I'm a writer because it's easier and I just would like to keep moving on down the trail. And so to some extent, that I have shadowed actually my most important contribution. And so like figuring out a way to bring more of that out, even after 30 years, I'm still doing it, and the images that go along with this are the crow is often an image. That was what came to me, when I was wrestling with, do I stay or go from academia? I had the black crow coming to me in a dream. And if I had known at the time, oh, you got the black crow, the answer is go. Right? Putrefaction, like, yeah, something's dying, dude. You have to accept that this thing that you thought was going to be your career path, it ain't it, and you have so skulls, skeletons, death and decay, manure in my case recently, also purification by fire, purification by water, all of these things. The negretto could be any and all of these things. Here's an image of an alchemist being put in, his head is in a furnace and they're literally like blasting his brain with the fires of, so a dragon, right? Go, like the idea of a dragon blasting, right? Dragon energy contains the process of purification within that fire breathing. It's an image of the internal alchemist who is able to like just burn away the dross of accumulated crap that just happens in the course of natural being. So there's a fire that's associated with negretto, and it's a malefic fire. It's meant to be destructive a little bit, at least. So don't forget about the golden shadow. There may be healing powers and or survival instincts that come out of this. Like for instance, I did I was doing some alchemy recently where I did a hydrosol of lavender, and because Mercury was in its decan of Cancer, the second decan of Cancer, the Three of Cups. So I went to the lavender farm and I got some lavender. But here's the thing: there's this beautiful creature that's so alive, and it's summer solstice. It's at the height of its aliveness. It's blooming. It's right. What do? I chop it up. You've got to harvest it. And she showed me how to do it. And it's like, you cut it back to here and it's healthy actually, but it is like a chopping. And then you don't just chop it. Then I put it in a jar and I tinctured one. I got 3 bundles, of course, for Mercury. So I tinctured one bundle with like 100 proof vodka. And then the other 2 bundles I put in the still, and I steamed those, and then I distilled the steam. So, and then I put the lavender in the compost pile, right? And so there's a myth that goes along with this, which is some of the Greek myths, like they're so disturbing, but but you know, life can be that way. One of the myths that's often used for the negretto is the myth of Coronis, and it's a little bit patriarchal too, or like toxic masculine or whatever, but like, hey, here we are, right? So Coronis is the consort of Apollo. Whether or not they're married, I don't remember, but she's, you know, the lover of Apollo. And she's in fact pregnant with Apollo's baby, although whether or not they know this, again, is like, I'm not exactly sure. But Apollo has to go away, and he's got this like sneaky suspicion that Coronis is running around on him. And so he tells the crow to watch over Coronis while he's gone. And by the way, the crow is in this myth is originally white. It's a white bird. And the crow was like basically in shamanistic terms, the familiar of Apollo, right? So he like leaves his animal familiar. In other words, his soul is watching over this thing while his body is elsewhere. And so yeah, Corona's got a lover on the side or something, and the crow is like the whistleblower. Essentially, there's this whistleblower energy that goes with crow, the constellation. It's like really, I've seen it be a very prevalent theme. Even the magical star of the constellation, Algorab, it's like one of the magical attributes is that it's like it's a nasty, you know, little you know, it can be nasty, right? It's like one of the ones that seems to be overtly malefic. And yes, like here's the thing, whistleblowers are often treated as criminals, but they're also heroic in some cases, right? So somebody said something that I thought was really insightful. It's not so much that the crow told on Coronis, but he kind of enjoyed it. He's like, yeah, your girlfriend cheating on you. And Apollo was so pissed. He was like, in his rage, he roasted the crow and turned him black. Right. So that's how the crow became black, according to this myth. And the worst part is he called up his sister and he's like, bitch is cheating on me, cut her down. And I mean, it's redneck as hell, right? And she does. And then Hermes comes along and is like, brother, Apollo, big bro, that girl got your baby in her belly. Like you might want to and Apollo's like, oh my God, and he does the cesarean section or something, and that's how Asclepius was born. So out of this crazy dysfunctional redneck drama, Asclepius, the great healer, is born, and Asclepius is given to Chiron, and Chiron teaches him the art of healing, and he becomes a healer. So it's kind of like out of this crappy, awful story, there's still this beautiful thing that comes out of it. And I think that's actually like, that's the thing about the Greek gods. They're so human. I mean, that's like, who hasn't experienced some redneck drama in their life? I mean, no matter where you come from. And, you know, it's easy to just be like judgmental and look down on that. But at the same time, it's like, wow, man, that's kind of just part of it. And yet, even in the midst of that, beautiful things can come out of ugliness, I guess, so here's Asclepius and the muses, and there's Hermes. And yeah, and so it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. It reminds me of that fable. I think I mentioned this fable last time, right? So the farmer has a son, and the son finds a horse and just, oh my God, we got a horse for free. How lucky. And the farmer says, we'll see. And then the boy's riding the horse and ends up falling off and breaks his leg. And somebody says, oh my God, how unlucky. We'll see. And then, the army comes along drafting people for the next war, as armies do. And the son doesn't have to go because he's on a crutches. And so, oh, how fortunate. We'll see, Um, and the way Jung talked about this was in antiodromia. There's any time that we become unbalanced and too fixated on one thing, life does not work that way. Life is a constant flowing exchange. And if we become too fixated or too one-sided, the forces of nature will bring an abundance of the opposite characteristic into our life to like challenge that, to force us to come to grips. And it may seem evil, even it may seem completely destructive, it may seem like a tragedy, and it may actually be a tragedy. I mean, I've lost loved ones in tragic ways, and yet if I really look at my life, like following that tragedy, there were nothing short of what I would describe as miracles. I mean, my dream whereby I became an astrologer, it followed the loss of my little brother. And I have to feel that like maybe that was a gift from, maybe that's like the compensating, it's like in my grief, I was hollowed out. And because I was hollowed out, because I loved him so much, and my grief was so strong that I was just cried out empty. And because of that, something pure and beautiful was able to enter me, I don't know any other way to see it. And so, as much as I would give anything to have him back, I have this other thing that I wouldn't actually give away for anything. So there's a paradox there, and that's life. And so the quote from Jung is, the grand plan on which the unconscious life of the psyche is constructed is so inaccessible to our understanding that we can never know what evil may not be necessary in order to produce good through an antiodromia, and what good may very possibly lead to evil. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the road to nirvana is paved with sorrow and suffering. That's life, man. And we can't get too fixated about what is good and what is evil, in the sense of like, yes, we have to have morality and we have to try to live a just and good life, for sure. I'm not saying that. I'm not being morally relativistic. What I'm saying is we can't be too ready to ascribe good or evil to the fate that befalls us, because we don't know. I mean, I would never have guessed that within a relatively short time after the worst trauma of my life, I'd be like gifted this thing that resulted in a 30-year career that's completely transformed my life. Is the best thing that ever happened to me, came out of the worst thing that ever happened. I would never have guessed that, for sure, and so it's really important to remember that, and not to curse God or curse Mercury retrograde, or be like all like stuck on the negativity, because you'll miss the beauty of it. And that would be the real tragedy, you see. If Apollo had just been, thank God Hermes woke him up and was like, dude, your baby, like, if you like, you can't save your wife, you done killed her, but the baby could at least be saved. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater is kind of the message there. And so here's Jung's dragon that he met in the Red Book experience. So there's this deep, dark, mysterious part of us that we need to contact, and it may be painful, it may be ugly, it may be tragic, but there's no avoiding it. And so embracing it is really the only option, you see. So spiritual practices that help you embrace the negretto, the potlatch or giveaway, like giving away particularly something valuable that you're actually attached to and saying, nope, going to give that away. So like alcohol or sweets. In my case, I'm trying to do a purification. So I'm trying to stay off of alcohol and sweets and carbs in general and whatever, fasting from negative behaviors and thoughts. I'm trying to actually clean up my language, and I don't think I've done a very good job on this show, so forgive me, but just particularly anything that's overdone is negative, in the sense that too much is of something always leads to the balance of the opposite. And so if you can let go of the too much naturally, then you're saving yourself the compensatory action of the opposite coming in and flooding the scene with the right. So contemplation, meditation, journaling, art, group or individual therapy, and just what I call gathering medicine. So like when I'm out on the bike trail and I'm having these experiences with the butterflies and the birds, to me, that's gathering medicine. I'm gathering allies. I'm reconnecting with parts of my soul. Like the first step, by the way, in the separation stage of Campbell's journey is the mentor gives the heroine a magical tool to help on the journey, and then she gathers allies and friends to help her on the journey. And so that's what I think I was gifted with these animal allies, is like they were helping me to manage this this difficult process, you see. And so just being aware of like the gifts within the darkness and just allowing the process to be and do its thing, and understanding that it's sacred. It's not nihilistic. God, don't mock God. Don't Nihilism to me is a mockery. It's absurd. Like people talk about absurdist philosophies, and yes, life can be absurd. I get it, but to say it's only absurd is the true absurdity for me. I mean, God will not be mocked, I don't think. And so to just say, you're mocking God. Like there's a reason, there's a purpose. Like, okay, yeah, sure, complain, bitch time, wallow around in your negativity, get good and dirty, but wash up, for goodness sakes. You know what I'm saying? And then get on with it. And from that cleansing, and that's also part of the negretto, right? The blackening, the roasting of the is followed by a washing, right? You burn away the gross dross, and then you pour the water over. Dissolution. There's calcination and then dissolution, and then you wash clean, right? And from this calcination and dissolution comes the white light of the albedo, which is like my dream. My dream was kind of like the albedo and the rubedo in one, right? The sun is definitely a symbol of both. Is reddening. So it was like, but the reddening really came after, in that I had to learn how to be an astrologer. That was which I'm still in, I'm still doing, you know. But this dream, this sudden influx of spiritual awareness, that's the albedo, and that's the gift of accepting the blackness, right? The whiteness comes out of the blackness. And so there's this revelation of the inner opposite that comes out of this hieros gamos, of this marriage, sacred marriage of yin and yang. I don't know if I said this, but when I was looking at the river, there was literally a yin yang. And I came back the next day and it was still there, but it was like bigger. And I was like, holy moly, man. Wow, this is such a trip. So in Jungian terms, this is the inferior function, right? So I tend to be intuitive, right? Which is about understanding the directionality of something, like where it's going, like anticipating. So when I can just like practice mindfulness and just be in the moment, like that feeling of the erotic joy of nature, that was super much a breakthrough for me, because I'm usually so much in my head or being intuitive that I totally miss that. And so embracing, for me, the opposite is sensation. And so like mindfulness is really important. If you're normally a thinker, it could be just getting into your feelings. Yeah, whatever your opposite is, like that's where the albedo comes from, is that it comes from this embrace of the and so the symbols that accompany the albedo are often a king and a queen. There's a sacred marriage, and from this there is produced a child. King and queen are usually represented by the sun and moon, but it can also be Venus and Mars, who are, by the way, in conjunction in Leo. So there's this really beautiful sacred marriage energy going on there that is very helpful, I think. The stag and the unicorn. Sometimes there's like 2 or 3-headed dragon or lion. There's like a bird chained to a rock, or a bird chained to a frog, or like these weird symbols of like the above and the below being united in the alchemical literature. So it's really interesting. Like I'm sitting here like becoming one with the spirit of the river, kind of, and then there's this butterfly sucking the salt off of my toes. And then I see these 2 birds, right? So it's like, oh yeah, like wow, like that's albedo, baby. Like there's a bird and I guess I'm the toad. Yeah, so there's like these opposites that unite in the albedo, but that's not the goal, like, right? Like illumination, enlightenment is just the midpoint of the journey. It's then you have to actually so here's an image of Aphrodite and Hermes uniting to produce this sacred, and this fire in the sacred vessel where the sun and the moon are united. You can see the alchemical symbol for water, which is the unconscious, right? And Mercury's retrieving something from the unconscious while they're both carrying torches. And there's this alchemy that's happening between the two. So if Mercury's like mind and Venus is like emotions or feelings or bodily sensation, there's this marriage between the above and the below that happens. And there's a third thing that comes out of this. And so, you know, if this isn't happening naturally, you can sort of induce this around the Cazimi, because the Cazimi literally symbolizes a meeting in the throne room of the king or queen. So there's this integration of the rational consciousness with the intelligence of the heart. And so there's this sort of logical awareness, and there's this sort of, so there's right brain, left brain, right? And the two together produce this mercurial consciousness, which is more complete than either one by itself. So the red king and the white queen produce this vision of this higher vision. And so the animus in Jungian psychology serves as a gateway to the collective unconscious, to universal possibilities, right? So this is what the albedo is about. And then finally, there's this process of the libido. With the spiritual practices for the albedo, again, the week before and after the Cazimi, but especially the day before, the day of, and the day after the Cazimi, you might do a vision quest ceremony where you go, like, that's kind of what I was doing out on the bike trail, even though I didn't realize it. That was a vision quest. I went out there and I found what medicine I needed to do this particular transformation. Hawk and heron and butterfly, you know. So you could consult an oracle, like my medicine cards, like that was the very first oracle that I began my journey with. And so it's really wild how the animals show up for me when I'm going through transformations. They just consistently just show up, and it's amazing. You could create a vision board. You could visit places where you could go on a pilgrimage to a place where, like, so Venus symbols are obviously pinnacles, seashells, doves, roses, apples, green stones. I mean, any place that you feel is a place of beauty, Venus is there, you know. And so you could create that space. You could create a beautiful space and then have a vision quest, like by meditating or dreaming or whatever, right? I could take this lavender, what do you call it? The water of lavender. It's geez, I'm not thinking of the word right now. It's not a tincture. It's a well, that's weird. The word finally completely escaped my mind, but I could take and, like, you know, do up my sheets really nice and put some rose petals under my pillow and just create a beautiful space for dreaming, right? There's a million ways you could honor Venus in that way. And you can invite the albedo in that way, right? And then finally, the final stage is the libido, which is the reddening. And this is the hard work of creating a new reality out of this vision that comes to you through the albedo, right? So there's the return. So the metaphor is like, if you get a wound, right, it turns black, like there's a scab. And then when the scab falls off, it's kind of white. It's not really the regular color of regular skin. And then it becomes red again and becomes revivified, right? And so this reddening, like, it's like I said, they would take like manure and pile around the vessel so to heat it up and to let it digest, or to let it even ferment. So there's this reheating and re-enlivening of what the albedo gave us. So you have to sacrifice the work back to the work. So, like, you have to be willing to, like, apply the same process of breaking down and of this beautiful white vision. Like, you have to be willing to putrefy that to really take it to the next level. So the images that come from the libido are the peacock's tail. There's this beautiful array of colors, a pelican feeding its young. So really any vision of, like, the feeding of young. A phoenix, which is born from the fiery ashes of its predecessor. Flowers in bloom are total libido. That's the total revivification of something that was previously dead, and it happens yearly. It's this wonderful alchemical journey of nature. And yeah, it's like I said, this may happen in 2 stages, right? So you like for instance, here's this vision of this alchemical emblem where this lion and this bear are like pouring water into this furnace, and then out of the furnace comes these birds. And it says, here are the components of the secret fire: the fiery water and the watery fire, which, excited by ordinary elemental fire, cause the birds to fly. So there's this fiery water, which is an anagram for the watery fire is alcohol. So it's watery fire, right? It's fire water. But so you get that through fermentation. So the harvest is the grapes or the barley or the potatoes or whatever. Like that's the lesser stone. And then you have to be willing to sacrifice that, mash it up. So in my case, I had to be willing to sacrifice this beautiful lavender, which was its own completion, own libido. And I had to negretto that in order to get the higher, more purified form of the lavender water. Hydrosol, that's the word. For Pete's sakes. Where do words go when they're not in your brain? I don't even know. Hydrosol, right? There's like this soul, sun, hydro. There's this fire water. It's this enlivened water. You see, this fiery water is the so there's a watery fire, which is the process of like bubbling, ferment, right? There's this fiery process that happens within the water. And then distillation is this turning that into steam and then condensing it, so whereby it's purified. And so the pure spirit, the birds of spirit, are extracted from the plant material, from the water that was, so the plant becomes water, which then becomes spirit, you see? And so by sacrificing our beautiful vision and allowing the forces of the world and material reality to work on it, we can make it real and refine it. And so that's the final stage of the transformation. So yeah, like shadow, maybe, but not like I've seen it. Like the shadow I know has 3 parts, 3 colors, 3 alchemical operations. So it's like, it's not just this sort of generalized shadow that happens before and after the retrograde. To me, there's a really beautiful, much more specific, much more concrete, much more tangible, much more workable process that is the alchemy of the 3 shadows, really. There's the black, the white, and the red shadow, you see? And so, that's the beauty of this beautiful art that we have, is that it has 2 sister arts, alchemy and magic, that can inform and really bring to the next level our practice and our awareness and our living embodiment of this sacred art whereby we call ourselves astrologers, you see? So don't forget to visit me at dreamastrologer.com, sign up for the newsletter, check out my social media. I posted a beautiful photo of Venus, Mars, and Regulus the other day. So if you haven't been able to see that for yourself, there's always the photos that I post on social media. And let's see, what else have I been doing on there? I'm trying to remember what's going on Twitter. Twitter's like a crypto thing for me, so I've been watching the crypto thing on there. Some people are not so much into that, so I won't belabor that point, but visit me on social media, sign up for the newsletter. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot. Talk about beautiful. So I'm gonna have, in less than a month, I'm gonna have a guest on the show, Merlina Brimner, author, artist, hermeticist, wrote a wonderful book, which I was gifted by her publisher. And we're going to do an interview with her. And I'm just so like, this book is incredible. It's like the breadth of her scholarship is enormous. And she's not even a scholar, she's a dang artist. But it's like the real thing, y'all. And I'm really excited to meet her and talk with her and share the beauty of her contribution with y'all. And so let me see, I'll show you the book briefly. Let's see, it's actually out here. Wow. Hermetic philosophy and creative, and I gotta find the perfect, let's see. There we go. Hermetic philosophy and creative alchemy. It's a hardback, pretty thick, really nice book, and super loaded with, I mean, she literally covers all the stuff. And that is a real accomplishment in and of itself. Like there's so many things that go into the Hermetic. You know, there's the corpus hermeticum, but then there's the Gnostic stuff and the Nag Hammadi and the Greek magical papyri, and she goes through all of it. And but without being like, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, like sometimes the beauty where I say, well, now let me be clear. When I say she's not a scholar, what I mean is she doesn't write like a scholar, but this is a scholarly work. I'm not dissing that at all. It's a work of really fine scholarship, but it's written by an artist, which makes it a lot more accessible for me. She literally says, like, you have to approach this as you would a relationship with a person. And that's, like I always say, like, that's the beauty of the Greek gods, is they're pretty human. And so yeah, definitely put that on your schedule or be on the lookout for when that hits the airwaves, because she's also got a second book, and so I'm hoping it's just the first of at least a couple episodes with her, Marlena Brimner. She's on oh my god, there's a moth on the screen right now, and I think, well, this one is just black and yellow. That's crazy. Yeah, she's on Twitter. Somebody found her on there, and I'm connected with her on Twitter, Instagram too. So you can find her on there if you want to preview, and I'm really looking forward to that. So stay tuned for that next time, and until then, just, you know, I want to leave you with like these messages that this great being initiated me into during the pandemic. He told me to call him Ion, and he was very much a he in my experience. So that's, I'm going to call him a he. And he told me, like, there were 3 lessons, there were 3 parts of this initiation, and it was, be yourself. Like, all the people pleasing, all the stuff that we kind of have to do socially, you can let that go, actually, and relax into a sacred space where you can just be yourself. you know, and so be yourself, remember who you are. So remember, like in the Orphic sense, what that means is like they had these magical tablets that they would put on their coffin so that they would, when they got to the afterlife, they would say the password, which is I am a child of earth and the starlit sky, right above, below. And I would like to drink from the waters of memory, please. I want to remember who I am so that I can keep these beautiful lessons that I've learned and keep progressing on the path. So be yourself, remember who you are, and love yourself. Self-love is, and when he laid that one on me, man, I was so brokenhearted because he told me he was going to have to go. And I was like really kind of empty and I didn't know what to ask, but I knew that I had one last chance. So the thing I came up with was, okay, what's the one thing I can do to help the most people? I thought it was a pretty clever question. And instantly he said, that's easy. Love yourself. And when you think about it, I'm not sure, because I don't think you can be sure about any of this stuff, or not for long anyway. But remember we were talking about the philosopher's stone is like it's everywhere, but it's nowhere. It's like unseen and seen. It's like this precious, beautiful thing, but it's very common. It's love, man. It's love. And if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. Not really. It's codependent or needy, or God only knows what it is if it's not coming from a place of self-love first. And so that's really the goal, is loving yourself, and loving yourself in all aspects, loving yourself, allowing, that's another dichotomy that I've been going through. There's like this really sweet, childlike energy, and there's like this ruthless, like it's not even just like what people call colonial or blah blah blah. Like the colonialists, they were ruthless, but they kind of put a pretty package on it. You know, my take on like the ancient Persian empire was they were pretty much dominators and proud of it, you know. And I've been in touch with both of those energies, like this really sweet childlike, and then next thing you know, there's this ruthless, like I'm gonna freaking dominate the heck out of this. And I'm like, what the they're both me. They can both be really useful, actually. um and loving myself, all parts of myself, man, that's a lifetime's work, right? That's the great work. Essentially, it's about love, and Venus is the goddess of love, you know. And so um here we are. It was this wonderful opportunity to love ourselves more completely. And it's as simple as that. And it's damn difficult. So I wish you lots of love, lots of light, even in the darkness. And more than anything, the ruthless will to do the work of making that love real, y'all, and bringing it into the world, because damn it, we need it. You know, we need it. All right. Peace, love, and light. Bye for now.